My name's Arthur, and I thank you for joining me as today we read together from Joshua chapter 12, as the writer summarises the victory that the Lord has given the children of Israel as they come to take the land. These are the kings of the land whom the children of Israel defeated, and whose land they possessed on the other side of the Jordan toward the rising of the sun, from the river Arnon to Mount Hermon, and all the eastern Jordan plain. One king was Sihon, king of the Amorites, who dwelt in Heshbon, and ruled half of Gilead, from Ariel, which is on the bank of the river Arnon, from the middle of that river even as far as the river Jabbok, which is the border of the Ammonites, and the eastern Jordan plain, from the sea of Sinroth as far as the sea of the Arabah, the Salt Sea, and the road to Beth Jeshimon, and southward below the slopes of Pisgah. The other king was Og, king of Bashan, and his territory, who was of the remnant of the giants, who dwelt at Ashtaroth and Edrei. And he reigned over Mount Hermon, over Selkar, over all Bashan, as far as the border of the Geshurites and the Maacathites, and over half of Gilead, to the border of Sihon, king of Heshbon. These Moses the servant of the Lord and the children of Israel had conquered. And Moses the servant of the Lord had given it as a possession to the Reubenites, the Gadites, and half the tribe of Manasseh. And these are the kings of the country which Joshua and the children of Israel conquered on this side of the Jordan, on the west, from Baal-Gad in the valley of Lebanon, as far as Mount Halak and the ascent to Mount Seir, which Joshua gave to the tribes of Israel as a possession according to their divisions, in the mountain country, in the lowlands, in the Jordan plain, in the slopes, in the wilderness, and in the south. The Hittites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. The king of Jericho, 1. The king of Ai, which is beside Bethel, 1. The king of Jerusalem, 1. The king of Hebron, 1. The king of Jarmuth, 1. The king of Lachish, 1. The king of Eglon, 1. The king of Gezer, 1. The king of Debir, 1. The king of Geder, 1. The king of Hormah, 1. The king of Arad, 1. The king of Libnah, 1. The king of Adullam, 1. The king of Makkedah, 1. The king of Bethel, 1. The king of Tappuah, 1. The king of Hepher, 1. The king of Aphek, 1. The king of Asheron, 1. The king of Madon, 1. The king of Hazor, 1. The king of Shimron-Meron, 1. The king of Aksaph, 1. The king of Tanakh, 1. The king of Megiddo, 1. The king of Kedesh, 1. The king of Jokneam in Carmel, 1. The king of Dor in the heights of Dor, 1. The king of the people of Gilgal, 1. The king of Tirzah, 1. All the kings, 31. So reads Joshua chapter 12. So the summary that the writer gives us indicates the total territory that was occupied. The land previously had been administered by 31 kings. These were city-states. They were completely removed to be replaced by the single people, the children of Israel, organised as 12 tribes. There would be 12 tribal territories, the tribe of Joseph being divided into Ephraim and Manasseh, and the territory of Manasseh granted some on the east and some of the west of the Jordan. And the tribe of Levi would not have a territorial inheritance, but just inherit cities distributed throughout the land to integrate and hold the nation together as a single people. But God has displaced these separate kings, these 31 kings, and taken over the nation with a completely different kind of structure, where God himself would be king of the land, and the children of Israel would operate under his authority according to the law that had been given by Moses. And the territory that they occupied is much greater than what Israel currently occupies at the present time. It included the whole territory of Lebanon, up north to Mount Hermon, on the east and on the west. So at the present time we have Syria on the east and we have Jordan on the east, but all this territory belonged to Israel. At this time it was taken from the Amorites and given to Israel. And of course all the way down to Gaza and to the Dead Sea. God didn't give the land of the Ammonites or the land of the Moabites to Israel, or the land of the Edomites. The Edomites were in Mount Seir, and the Moabites and the Ammonites and the Midianites were east of the Dead Sea and further east than the territory that the Israelites had along the Jordan. An issue that faces many countries today is the issue of refugees, people who flee their previous country of residence because of opposition against them. This is what the Israelites had done. They had left Egypt because the Egyptians oppressed them. They didn't treat them as equal citizens, they treated them all as slaves. And after they'd put up with that for 80 years, under the leadership of Moses, they left en masse, a large movement of people. And where were they to go? Well, God had a plan for them to occupy the land of Israel. But the people who were in that land did not open the door to them, to let them in. When the Jews were driven out of Germany by the Germans during the Second World War, few countries opened the door to welcome these refugees. And so Britain organised for them to take over territory in the Middle East, in their ancient homeland. But the local people still opposed them. And so history is repeating itself. But these people are now back in the land. And the option remains, when refugees turn up at our doorstep, how do we respond to them? And the common way of responding is with fear and to drive them out. In the modern situation, of course, you are bringing people of a different culture, a different religion, and so that brings instability. Because the residents of the land opposed the children of Israel and fought against them, the children of Israel fought back and destroyed the people of the land. We don't think that that would be a good outcome in our present situation, and so we will fight against those who come to us as refugees. This is a huge issue. It has been going on for centuries, people fleeing from one place to try and take up residence in another. As recorded in Acts chapter 17, Paul says, God has made from one blood every nation of men to dwell on all the face of the earth, and has determined their pre-appointed times and the boundaries of their dwellings. That is, God has a time and place for everybody in the earth, and that there are times where nations move and new peoples come and take over other territory or merge with other territories. This is all part of God's grand plan, and necessarily part of that process involves war, because nation rises against nation, as Jesus told us would happen. And what Paul says is that God determines the boundaries and the times that people occupy particular places. God has a time and God has a program, and we need to be sensitive to that time and program. So you can consider the coming of Europeans to Australia as an invasion, but it is something that God is behind. And the sensible approach is, in all of these things, to acknowledge the Lord God and seek to live in a way that pleases him. For this is what the children of Israel were to do. As they came into the land, they had the commands of God defining the kind of society that they were to set up. And God is consistent to his character. As he told the Israelites, you keep these rules, you can live at peace in the land, and you'll have prosperity. But you turn against these rules, and you'll have famine, you'll have strife, and you will ultimately be thrown out of the land, even as they had thrown out the previous residents. And so, throughout history, God has blessed nations which have sought him, and God has ultimately dispossessed nations that turn against him.